Tonight we continue our Human Race series, an ongoing examination of race and identity in America.
Many Native Americans across the country fear the few remaining connections to their heritage are being taken away. Dan
Bones is here to tell us about some Native Americans in Queens who are fighting to preserve their legacy. Good evening, Dan.
Well, Christina and Derry, as a country now, the United States is in the midst of an identity crisis. Questions about who belongs, who has the right to be here. For American Indians, this is a debate that dates back centuries and a fight that carries on to this day. We start in Queens, the complicated history of some of New York's first settlers. One note here, we started shooting this story over the winter, one of those cold, snowy days.
The memory of the stone in and of itself represents something strong.
It is a stone split open by a tree, carrying the burden of both life and death. Davis, Waters.
These names, it's all family.
Harry Wallace is elected chief of the Unkechaug Nation.
Oh, it's powerful to come in here.
Some of his ancestors are buried beneath this boulder inside a Queens cemetery.
It's a living hurt, okay? Every time we think about that, it's painful.
Painful because back in 1931, at least 24 bodies, members of the Shinnecock, Montauk, and Matinecock tribes, were removed from an ancient burial site as relatives and descendants looked on and moved to a mass grave.
Plain and simple, you know, they needed to widen the boulevard. This was pre-work done in anticipation of the 1939-40 World's Fair.
Jason Antos is a Queens historian and author. He says some of those remains that were moved to make room for what is now Northern Boulevard likely belonged to some of New York's first settlers. The Matinecocks were some of the first people to settle in Queens back in the 1600s, before it was Queens.
Yeah, they're the first people, the first residents, and they dominated pretty much the entire North Shore of Long Island and the North Shore of Queens County.
They lived in small groups near the bay, speaking the language of the Algonquin family, a dialect spoken by hundreds of thousands of natives from Canada to Virginia.
They were hunters, they were farmers, and they primarily fishermen also. You know, they took advantage of the abundance of oysters that was available in the area.
But like nearly all Native Americans, by the end of the 1900s, most who settled in New York were overrun. Today, natives make up less than 2% of the U.S. population.
This used to be all our lands. Now it's gone. It's only a few of us remaining, even Matinecocks.
Osceola Townsend is chief of the Matinecocks. After all these years, 3 families still live in Queens. The group now working with the Queens Memory Project and Douglaston Little Neck Community Library to preserve their story. He says what happened to them is still happening in some form today.
We have Standing Rock, North Dakota. Donald Trump and his people have interest in a pipeline going onto the burial sites.
In Standing Rock, North Dakota, more than 90 Native American tribes gathered protesting the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline. It was recently given the green light by the Trump administration. And that brings us to Mahwah, New Jersey, and the RAMAPOUGH LUNAAPE tribe. For the indigenous Native Americans, their identity has always been tied to their land, protecting the earth. It's a fight we still see today, whether it's out in North Dakota, all those protests at Standing Rock against the Dakota Access Pipeline. It's why the RAMAPOUGH LUNAAPE Indians set up these teepees to stand in solidarity, until it became very clear they had their own fight on their hands, their own pipeline proposed to run through their land called the Pilgrim Pipeline.
And one of the issues right now in this area, right where we stand, is exactly the same issue we had when these people first got here. They want the land.
Chief DWAINE Perry says a lack of a political stronghold nationally has always worked against American Indians.
You know what? We don't vote.
Why not?
Because one issue is I think we're actually afraid of the power structure.
Since the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, access to polling stations near Indian reservations has also been an issue. There's no reservation, however, about opinions on the current state of politics.
Travel bans, they got all these problems going on. If these people are so insecure about their own race that they have to pick on everybody else, let me invite you to come to a ceremony and maybe relax and learn something about being a human being.
Let's talk about who's the real immigrants, right? So if you're going by who was here first, then please vacate the premises and give us our land back.
Tecumseh Caesar balances the realities of the U.S. today and the importance of carrying on the history in his blood, his name in a native tongue.
Ni Dashi's Ni Tecumseh, Ni Dashi Yayi, Matinecock tribe of Siwanahaki, Wak Wampanoag Pokanoket, Wak Blackfoot, Wak Montauk. So what I said to you is that I'm Matinecock and I'm from Long Island. It's amazing that people like me are still alive, you know, and that we're able to say this is our land, even traditionally our land, you know, and we've been here for thousands of years.
There's an ancient saying by an ancient chief that says, time follows time, nation follows nation like the waves of the sea. None of us are immune from the common destiny.
Destiny may be like what happened with this stone. Inscribed on the front, it says, "Here lies the last of the Matinecocks." What's risen from the ground tells a very different story.
The memory of it was misrepresented. I think the tree is evidence that we are still here.
They are still here. Now, while the Matinecocks have never stopped seeking answers from the city over all these years, some history is visible. Part of Northern Boulevard was recently renamed after the tribe. It's the site of the Battle of Madman's Neck. That's where the Matinecocks made their last stand before being driven out.